Constant listeners, Far Middle Podcast, Nick DeOlius with you. Thanks for tuning in. Episode 64. We're not going to dedicate this episode to a single person or even a single team. Instead, we're going to dedicate episode 64 to the NCAA men's basketball team tournament bracket. It's a geometric thing of beauty. The nickname everyone knows, even if they don't follow basketball, right? March Madness. And by the way, that phrase, March Madness, is trademarked by the NCAA, so you got to use it with caution. And they've also trademarked not just March Madness, but Elite Eight, Final Four, and Big Dance. The NCAA is always looking out for the student athlete and the bottom line. Nonprofit, you know my what. And I know it is now technically 68 teams with those playing games that they've added in. But the essence, it's still a 64-team bracket when it's all said and done. And the 64-team field first was instituted and introduced back in 1985. The coveted number 1 seed down to the lowly 16 seed, looking to be a Cinderella across 4 regional brackets. Again, a geometric thing of beauty. And I think the men's basketball tournament teaches kids more about small schools and geography that end up being 16 or 15 seeds in any college prep course can. It's amazing how many young adults or kids or students following the bracket, filling out their brackets. Where's that school at? What state? What's going on with that institution? They learn a lot just by filling out the brackets. I guess it's a silver lining. North Carolina has the most number 1 seeds at 17 since the 64-team field was instituted. NCAA gets about $800 million a year from the tournament's TV rights. That's going to jump to over $1 billion a year in 2025. The men's basketball tournament, when it's all said and done, it's effectively 100+% of the NCAA's profitability. So it is big business. The greatest championship team since 1985 when the field went to 64 teams, well, that could end up in endless debate. I'm going to go with the 1992 Duke team. You had Leitner and Hurley on there as seniors. You had a guy named Grant Hill, up and coming. He turned out to be quite the player, both in college and in the pros. Second best all-time team, I would go with the 1990 UNLV Running Rebels. I love Tarkanian. Revolutionary team with their style of play. Really enjoyed watching that team in the early 90s. And by the way, that 1990 UNLV Running Rebs team, that brings to mind the best team to not win a championship, which, again, for my money, was the 1991 UNLV team, which is even more stacked, but did not end up winning a championship that year. Cinderellas, when you start thinking about like these Cinderella wins and who ended and runs and who ultimately ended up winning the overall championship, my favorite Cinderella, I wouldn't say it's the biggest Cinderella, but my favorite Cinderella was easy for me. That's the North Carolina State team, Coach Jim Valvano, 1983. I watched that as a kid from start to end of the tournament. They were a 6 seed when they started, and the ACC back in the day, that was my second favorite conference to watch. And my second favorite Cinderella story, that one's an easy pick as well. That was the 1985 Villanova Wildcats, Raleigh Massimino. They were an 8 seed, so they're even more of a Cinderella, so to speak, at least to make it all the way through as national champs than NC State was in 83. And the Big East, for me, that was the ultimate basketball conference in the 80s and 90s. And just think of the coaches that you had in the Big East. You had Raleigh Massimino and Lou Carnesecca, John Thompson, of course, at Georgetown, Rick Pitino, Jim Boeheim, Jim Calhoun. Some of them I loved. Some of them I despised, but all of them I respected, and how could you not, based on what they all achieved. Now, does the tournament, today hold the same sway over me? No, not even close. And, maybe it's one and done mentality that you see throughout college basketball these days, so you really can't get to know the players, and the team's identity really doesn't shape over the course of a couple of years instead of sort of a one-shot deal. So maybe that one and done is a big part of it. Or maybe it's all this conference realignment that never seems to stop, and it's not stopping again. I see with USC and UCLA joining my Big Ten with Penn State. That'll be interesting to watch. And maybe it's because of other things in life just drawing your time away, right? You grow up, you become an adult, and all kinds of other things, more important things, are tugging at your time. So I do watch the tournament, don't get me wrong. It's not like I don't tune in, but not nearly as intensely or as closely as I used to. So episode 64 of the Far Middle goes to the Field of 64 and March Madness. Thanks for some of the best sports memories ever.